All right, I would like to call this regular meeting of the Darien RTM Education Committee to order. It is 7:35 on Monday, March 10th. And the first thing we're going to do tonight is welcome our RTM guests, Jack Davis and Frank Kemp from F&B and TGS&A, to give us an update on all of their good works with the Appendix B.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Frank's going to hand it over to me because I'm a little bit funnier. No, I'm just joking. Let me explain how this hack started out. For F&B, I was looking at all the departments, boards, commissions, grants, trying to figure out which standing committee was responsible for each and who's the second one on that. And I was doing that partly because of budget, you know, when we're trying to coordinate budget. Hey guys, you guys got to look at this. We're going to look at a high level, but you guys have to look at the detail. And I made the mistake of reading the definitions of the standing committee. And I'm going to be nice by saying they were old and archaic. Public Works still was supposed to look at our incinerator. That's, if you go to the swap shop, that's where that used to be. It was taken down in the 80s. It was still in there. And when I read them, I then read them to Kate Bush, who was our town administrator, and watched her jaw drop. And I went to Seth, who's our moderator, and said, Houston, we got a problem. And I read the other things that were there and said, you know, this whole section needs to be done. And so we called Frank, because that's their committee, and Frank and I have been working together. Part of it's because of because I get questioned, why are you doing this? You're not part of TGS&A. Part of it is because TGS&A is the only committee that doesn't look at a budget. And so when I'm looking at this, I'm also looking at it from a budgetary responsibility, a part of what we're doing. And then Frank keeps me honest on
Yeah, I
Robert's
think it
rules of
had
it.
personnel functions in there. And
Why don't you
in
tell
the
us what,
recent years, there's been HR department.
tell us what TGS&A stands for our new
Yes,
people.
very good, thank you.
Town Government Structure and Administration. It's also known as none of the above. There's so many different categories, and then eventually some item will fall down to us and the town code straightened out.
I will add, to me, that's the most powerful committee in the RTM, because they write the code and the ordinances. So if there's anything that needs to be done like this, that committee's responsible. And so, and they've done tremendous work over time, but they work with legal counsel, they work with other committees. But in reality, they, in my opinion, is the most, because you control the law.
They're very complimentary.
So,
Tell us what we got now.
okay. So we started to go, we started this, put it down for a while, because I had budget and I needed a rest. And so, you know, some people said this is taking a long time. My response is, this document isn't bourgeois. It's a fine wine. It's taking time to get it to where we need to get it. There's an introduction page that we handed out. What this does is, a suggestion was made by TGS&A that we have a footnote on why we made a change, if something's staying the same with that. And so the 5 basic categories we came, a change reflects the actual practice over the last 20 years. So there's 2 things that I'll mention that's in the code. One of the codes still said that somebody is limited to 2 RTM committees. That hasn't been done for 30, 40 years, and there's reasons for it. So we now reflect that a member can only be on 1 committee. It also, and you've heard Seth do that, and in my 20 years, I've heard 3 different moderators always say, are there any other committees that want to report? Well, the current code says only committees assigned by rules have the right to report on an issue. So we're getting things back in order to what really goes on in the RTM and the rationale for it. Change is sometimes just a clarification. As I mentioned, the standing committees are old, archaic, and simply incorrect. Standing committees, the other thing you'll see is that standing committees are empowered, and so we're putting clarification of your rights over here. While I'm on rules and Frank's on rules, I'm a standing committee guy. That's where my heart is. The standing committees of the RTM are the heart and soul of our legislative body. You have rights, there's things you can do. Yes, sometimes it's hard to effectuate policy, but you can influence it. The last one is, there's something that was so draconian that I took it out, because the power for the standing committees resides in the standing committee, and I'll give you a quick coverage of that. So I'm not going to read this whole thing, there's a lot of pages. The way this, so if you look at this document, the intro, it tells you what section and what page it's on. So if you only want to see what the clarifications are, you just need to read that. It's currently 11 pages, it's really 5. But because what we did is put existing code on one side and the proposed code on the other, so you can read lining it up. And I will say, Frank and I are not experts on how to do this, so there's going to be a little bit long, so it's 2 columns, but we write this column, then we have to write the equivalent on the other side. I'm sure there's a way in Word to do this. Neither Frank or I know how. So if we make a change, we may have to rejigger the whole committee.
So if you look at pages 6, 7, and 8, you'll see these are where the actual committee duties are outlined. The left is the existing one, the right is was part of the proposed change. And that's where you'll find the incinerator.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna go, there's still some wordsmithing that's going to be done, but I wanna go over what the Education Committee now says. It's liaison with the Board of Education, be responsible for following, monitoring, reporting, and recommending on all related financial and educational matters, as well as other areas assigned. That last part may come out because it's duplicative. I will say something else. On the financial matters, that is mentioned in an earlier section, but having worked with many of my illustrious members in the RTM, while we can lead a horse to water, we can't make them read this whole document. And I know that people are going to read the committee ones, so we restate certain things that are said earlier in this. Obviously, we follow Robert's Rules of Order. We took out those spots that say a meeting with a quorum, because you can't have a meeting where you can take action if you don't have a quorum. So you can discuss something, but you can't take any action, you can't vote on it. So we cleaned up little things like that together. We've met previously with many of the committees. I don't know if we caught education the last time out. We may have.
We did.
You did? Okay. I went back to some tapes and counted up.
Yeah.
There's been 15 to 20 individuals that have input into this document where there's been suggestions, comments, and other things made. And Frank and I have immediately entered them into the document and brought them back to TGSNA. The document as it stands now, I'm going to be very clear about this. This is not the Frank Kemp and Jack Davis document, contrary to popular belief. This has been reviewed in multiple meetings by TGSNA. TGSNA approved it, and the document that you're seeing proposed is a TGSNA document. This is their committee's document, and they'll have edits on it.
Jack, the outside counsel look at it too, or no?
Yeah,
Outside
absolutely.
We sent it to Wayne,
Yeah.
his office, to get wordsmithing, and matter of fact, he did not come back with conceptual changes, which we were very pleased with. But his paralegal, who was a good grammarian, moved some phrases around, so we've kept those. And we have just submitted this draft with the yellow flag saying changes are still being accepted or entertained. But rather than hitting with an 11-page document at the very last minute and have to get a quick review of it, we've given it to them as a courtesy.
And if I can, you guys had, sorry Jack, I know
No,
you
go ahead.
had a plan last time you talked about, it might have been 18 months actually. It's been some time, right?
Yeah.
Is it just time constraint that stopped it, or was there some issues? I mean, I don't need the inside football, but what
No,
happened?
it was predominantly time constraints, and with other things that
Yeah.
have come down the
Right.
pipe, for which I'm responsible
Yeah.
for, or Frank was responsible for. Frank and I still talk, you know, we'd have our lunches and other things like that. But we didn't go head hard into
Yeah.
this. We ourselves needed to take a break and go back to it. And since there was a change coming in with the new TGSNA,
Mhm.
we decided, rather than work with one group and then transfer it over to the other, we'd wait till the new committee was there and then bring it back to them, which is what we did. So, but yeah, we were still working on it, but it was more, you know, there were other
It
things.
took the summer off.
Yeah, as I said, it's not Beaujolais. There are a couple of things that if you go to on page 9, you'll see. There was a comment in here that the chair of any standing committee may be removed from such office for failure to discharge properly their duties by the Rules Committee. And we're being recorded and children might be listening, so I'm not going to say what I really thought of when I read this. That's no longer in the proposed thing. What is standing in here is that each officer of a standing committee shall hold office at the will of the committee and may be removed as such officer by a majority vote of all the committee members. Control of a committee resides with the committee, not with rules. And if anything, you'll see we've taken some powers away from rules and put them back in the committee where they belong. One of the other things that we added in here to just clarify, and it's on page 10, any standing committee may on its own discretion consider and report to the RTM upon any matter not referred to it, but which is in the purview of such standing committee. That now allows our moderators to say, is there anybody else who wants to report, when the prior one was saying, you really can't. But there's something else added here. Any standing committee or the Rules Committee is authorized to establish a subcommittee or working group to conduct a study or analysis within their purview. Now, that's been used by F&B, even though it wasn't necessarily in the ordinance, we really didn't care. It's been used by Public Works when they set up their sidewalk committee. Now, in some of our opinions, they always had that right, but understand, we're now codifying it so that none of the other boards can challenge an RTM when they do it. Again, within your purview. Now, that doesn't mean that you have the right to make the final decision, all right? Those reside at the boards, but, you know, all the committees can influence. I mean, for this education committee, and this goes back a while, there was a woman who was part of this committee, Joan Davis, for the longest time. Some people may know her. She's really responsible for getting Spanish and foreign language taught in our elementary schools. She really pushed this matter. It was when Lois Schneider was chair of education. She really pushed this issue to the Board of Ed consistently, and finally they adopted it. So, you know, there are things. Just recently, you know, I volunteered. They were looking at off-cycle because from a financial perspective, we don't want off-cycle items. Now, there's some reasons why we might, and in fact, at the RTM meeting that we're gonna have in March, 2 of the items are really off-cycle.
What does off-cycle mean?
Means it was not included in part of the budget. So when the school increased their security, they wanted a security initiative for $1,079,000. Personally, from an F&B perspective, knowing what it was, I would have recommended that we delay it until the budget cycle, because it would have been 10 basis points, we would have paid for it. Instead, we had to take it out of our general fund, which we need to maintain a certain balance in there for emergencies. It wasn't an emergency. It was something that they knew about during budget, and they didn't move it in on a timely basis. And and by the way, Board of Selectmen have also done things along those lines. But one of the keys are, if it's discussed during budget and we're waiting for better numbers or other things like that, then when it comes back to the Board of Selectmen, or the Board of Ed, the Board of Finance, and then to us, that's all right, because we already knew this was coming. We can plan for it when we're looking at how much money is available to pay down certain things when we're calculating what the final mill rate is. So we're gonna deal with some construction at the Norotan Heights Fire Department. But we've known that for a year. We're just waiting for some final numbers. There's a fire engine that's coming, a tanker, for the Darien Fire Department. We knew that was coming, and that was discussed during budget, so it meets the criteria. But John Zagroski had suggested that a group come up with what the guidance was for it. And so Sarah Newman, who led the group, myself, and Jen Chinesky participated in putting that together actually in a month, to which the Board of Selectmen then approved. Now, the reason why it's important that the Board of Selectmen approves it, because anything that comes off cycle either has to be using general fund funds, which the Board of Selectmen control, or we're bonding it. Because that, we have to figure out how we're paying for it. So it's important that when we're planning out what's gonna happen the rest of the year, we know what's potentially gonna be allocated for funds, or whether or not we should include it for taxes. But if we don't have the right number right now, we're not gonna tax for it. And that's part of why things come outside of the budget cycle. Other than that, one of the things that does come here, and I don't pretend to tell any committee how they operate. I have enough with my own committee. But one of the things that talks about here and how one can influence is, you know, if you look at the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Education rather, they have several subcommittees. So you can follow what's going on in curriculum because they have public meetings, and then if there's something that you, this committee wants to make comment on, you have an opportunity to do it. I don't follow the communications committee. I do not follow the curriculum committee. I do, and then, you know, there's policies that come out as well. I don't follow those. They, you know, they don't have financial impact, and I have a limited bandwidth. But I do follow the finance committee that comes out of there. And like even the last report that I gave, most of that came out of Rich Rudel's monthly financial report. And that's available publicly. The same way that I mentioned that there's other things that go on in town so that I can follow what's going on in the bonds from the Board of Finance. Now, I'm not suggesting that you really want to read these documents, but if you do, they're there. But members of this committee can follow those other committees and, you know, make that as part of this committee so that you know what's going on. One of my members is currently on the high school cell phone committee, all right? So she's having input into that. And so that's important that, you know, when they are doing things, I think when they were doing some of the other studies, that it's important that you try and get members of this committee onto anything that they're asking for public volunteers. It's a good way to get influence. So that's pretty much what this is about. We're asking you to read it and get back to us real quick. After a cutoff date, we're actually not going to take input. So, and I'm going to hand it over so Frank can now talk about what's going on for the rest of us.
So actually, this isn't our first rodeo.
Yeah.
We did go through this, and just before it was going to the RTM, we had a whole lot of comments come in, and some of them were good. That could have resulted in changing the phrasing. But you're caught in that bind between the time that rules creates the agenda for the RTM, and in that window, things started to wobble, and not the wheels didn't fall off, but we withdrew it from the RTM at that point and said nothing. So now what we're doing this week and next is visiting with each of the standing committees. And if we don't collect corrections at the meeting, we're inviting email that could be sent to either of us to address the problem. Those comments, and we have had a couple so far, are due by the 20th.
No, they're actually due, that's not true.
Yeah,
They're
you're
due,
gonna move it up.
no, we're monitoring what comes from each committee. So you guys have 1 week from today
There
to
you go.
get us
That's fine.
comments.
All right.
You know what my experience is if we say it's due, Frank will be organizing all of them on the 20th. But if I say the 20th now, you're gonna give it to me on the 25th.
It isn't our first radar.
I'm gonna be very honest about something else. Things that we don't have in time, you can do on the floor of the RTM. But expect to have an answer, and some of the answers you may not wanna hear. Because I will ask people, do you sure you wanna retract that?
Yeah, no, I go, what's up with that, old phraseology and.
Let me,
So
I
what
wanna just give one example.
Continuing on the 20th, we'll consolidate the comments and ship them to DGSNA, which does have a special meeting on the 24th. And the 24th, we'll go through what we've got, hopeful, and anticipate approving the text at that point. So that the rules will put it on the agenda for the late April meeting. So there we are. Over.
Yeah, if it's not on the April meeting, it's not being done until June or September.
Yeah.
But it's really, because budget meeting's long enough. You don't want to go through this on a budget meeting. But I'll give you just one little example of certain things that get responses. One of the suggestions that we had prior to the last one is that chairman of the political parties should not be able to be on rules, all right? And I spoke to the person who brought that to my attention, and I suggested that the person bring it to the floor of the RTM. And they said, why? I said, because I'm going to hand them the U.S. Constitution and embarrass them. And the comment was, you would embarrass them. I said, oh, yes, I will. Constitutional law.
A velvet touch. Yeah.
Right. Because we've taken a lot of suggestions in here. The constitutional law says that when there's election, somebody's political party should not exclude them from election. And the rules, being assigned to rules is an election within a district. Hence, it's not allowed by constitutional law to exclude anyone from running. All right? That's the only reason. So we are complying with Connecticut law. That's part of why the town council looks at this. But for the most part, we really believe it's a good document. TGSNA believes it's a good document. We're willing to answer. My phone number is on the website. It's to my cell. I have a landline. I don't even know what the number is. We don't even have a phone for it, actually. But,
Can I just say for our new members,
yeah,
I don't mean to interrupt, but also, to your point, the RTM is nonpartisan. So if you are on Rules Committee or any other committee, you should not be considering your own political opinions when you're doing work at the RTM. It's not, it's nonpartisan, and so I just wanted to point that out to our new members.
it's very important that it's nonpartisan. And we like to keep it that way. The only partisanship that should be in this RTM is what 100 citizens of this town in this legislative body believe what is good for the town. Our partisanship and loyalty should be to the town, and everybody's allowed to have their own opinion on that.
So on that front, if I can, this is good, and we're gonna give you comments, but the one we struggle with, and I'm glad that you guys sit here because you are in charge of making sure you understand the code, and you know, you've developed, changed it, and JAG has been involved in town government for a number of years. We are struggling, at least I'm struggling, you know, I think we're operating with one hand tied behind our back when we discuss the budget, RTM, we as RTM. And I'm saying that because, and we discussed it a little bit last time, we can decrease the budget that comes in front of us. We can decrease. Last year, Board of Education budget went from 115 to 122. That was proposed by Board of Education. Board of Finance said, let's do 120, right? We understand the budget, and we felt, even though this was not about line item veto or any of that, but we felt that in order to achieve the goals that we think are proper for our kids in school system, maybe it should be 121. We don't have that right, according to current code. Do you know about any other town that has that right? Have you guys looked
No.
into that issue?
No.
No. And
This is not town code.
Connecticut.
It is the Board of Education.
Yeah,
Authority comes from the Department of Education from the state. Towns provide a total budget appropriation for them. So even when I hear parents saying, oh, the Board of Finance should put 2 teachers over here and take back over here, that's not the Board of Finance's decision. The Board of Ed can do anything.
Correct.
And, you know, so we only do an appropriation. How they allocate that money is their decision. And you'll hear that, and we operate differently, and both ways are good ways to operate. F&B doesn't comment on the individual cuts or proposals that they make. We take a much higher view towards them. We did make one this year when they wanted to charge some parents who were already paying a lot of money, more money. But this committee can. We sort of stand back and we're looking at a total picture. But one of the things, based upon the responses that we were hearing from the parents, and on Super Saturday I was speaking to several parents, is that we have now requested that the Board of Education, in their front pages of when they're talking about the budget, have 5 years of what their net operating budget has been, what their capital requests have been, non-bonded, what their off-cycle requests have been, because there's been a lot of those, what their debt service is, and what they have returned to the town. So you have a true picture of what's going on in here.
I think,
So maybe I phrased it the wrong way. I'm not disputing the line item veto. We don't want a line item veto. They understand
Actually,
it, there's
I'd love to have
nine
it.
people focused on it, Dr. Adley, wonderful professionals, right? But Board of Finance think that this town should be taxed at 100, should be taxed at a number. We think it should be a little bit higher.
yeah.
We as RTN, I'm not even talking about these 15 people here, right? Currently, as the code stands, we cannot do that, right? So the question is, do any other towns,
No. They
why is
cannot.
that? Have we talked about it? Does it make sense?
It can be somewhat different.
Yeah,
So like in Stanford or like in Trumbull, their mayor has power over their budget. Now, in both those towns, the Board of Ed budget and the town budget are really close, it's like 50-50.
Mhm.
So those, their mayors can actually cut the budget. They can say, no, and that just really happened recently in Trumbull, that the mayor said, no, based upon other things that are going on in town, you can only get this percentage this year.
We can cut the budget too, at RTM. You can stand up and say, that's not bad, but I'm saying, could we increase it?
No.
And this is where it's frustrating because I think it feels as though we put a lot of work, time, energy, and a lot of the detail of the budget from the start to the middle to the, to the finish. And at the end of the day, if we decided we were unhappy with the number and we voted no, we've been counseled many times that the budget would then be last year's budget. It's not as if they would go back to the table and there'd be additional conversations. They would be basically, kneecapped with like, this year, an almost 5% less budget for next year.
I am currently working on what happens should the RTM vote no, because it needs to have better guidance in that. So I've been assigned by rules to work with both our Director of Finance and our Town Administrator, who's the same person right now, to come up with some methodology that's written in guidance of what happens should that occur.
Right.
It's not in the code, I mean, this is very important. It's
I
not in
agree.
the code, how it's treated.
What we are gonna do, what we expect to do is put that in the town code when that is defined. Everybody thinks they know how it will work.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But
Yeah,
it
we've been
hasn't-
having very
I know.
strong opinions
Yeah.
It
from
hasn't
everyone on
been
this
done.
point, because we've asked it every single budget
Yeah.
season that I can
Yeah.
remember, because we always feel a little.
And just to be honest, right, this is a
Frustrating.
100-member, body. It may not be the most efficient to weigh that, right? There's elections, right? If I want to influence the level of appropriation, tax appropriation, maybe I should run for Board of Finance. I get that, right? But has there a discussion been about the government's model that gives the 100 people that sit around the
It's the
board?
state
Right.
model, all right?
Not that many RTMs.
Yeah, this,
Mhm.
all right, so we do have certain authority. So in towns with a Board of Finance and an RTM,
Mhm.
both are considered budget-making authorities of the town. That to some of our elected officials in town is a new concept. All right? I'm sorry to put it that way.
We're all budget thinkers.
Yeah. No, it's called budget-making authority, because John Zagroski mentioned it, and he started at the discussion of debt. There is no budget in this town until the RTM acts, all right? And the one year that there was a proposal to cede our power to the Board of Finance, and then it was withdrawn at the last, my committee was fighting that, and I knew I had over 80 votes to tell them to go jump in the lake. And they withdrew that from it, and we still cut the Board of Selectmen budget. But I understand what your
Mhm.
frustration is. I will tell you something else. And so I'm taking it from a more holistic view. I do have line item veto, and you have line item veto on capital projects, regardless of who it is. We actually have line item veto on the Board of Selectmen budget. If we don't want to hire an extra policeman, we can say, no, we don't want to hire that policeman. You're not going to get him this year. And we have the right to cut it. Because it's under total appropriation, the board, and we can make a cut, we can't cut any particular program.
Right.
So we can say, oh, we don't like you buying too many crayons, and they can say, actually I had a quote when the budget was 50 million. If the Board of Ed wanted to go out after we gave them $50 million and buy $50 million of crayons, they could. All of those line items that we see in the budget are placeholders. Now, they're pretty good placeholders when you really look at what changes happened during the course of the year. And they do an excellent job. Rich did, and the gentleman before him did an excellent job of that. But the fact of the matter is that they also have net numbers. So if they get extra grants or extra monies, they spend it the way they want. If they have extra, because they have vacancies, they can use that money any way they want. And some of the discussions that go on about, you know, we really wish you would hire this person, do this and this curriculum and that, really has nothing to do with the budget. That has to do with the Board of Ed, what they decide. And so understand what the difference is. Now, from a higher level, you know, I've been talking for the last couple of years that some of the things that we've been doing in town has been masking the real cost to run this town. And that's because we've had extra money coming in because the grand list has grown, you know, because of the developments. We've had vacancies that are having money coming back. We're bonding everything, you know, including somebody's lunch if we could, during the time when interest rates were low. And I'm not going to blame them for it because I went before this body and said, do this. But at this time, anything south of $1 million shouldn't be bonded. And you heard that from John Zagrosky, and you're hearing it from me. And we've told that to the Board of Finance. If we end up with a 4 or 5% increase, so be it, all right? But when I hear people saying, well, we're not teaching this right curriculum, that's not because of the Board of Finance. The curriculum's decided by the Board of Ed. They can change any curriculum they want in there and drop this course and start that course. That's their responsibility, not the Board of Finance's. They also don't have a blank check. One of the other things F&B has been talking to them about, which is just good business management. And I use this not because I'm against it, but it's a perfect example. When Mandarin was starting to be taught at Middlesex, they went to the Board of Ed and said, it's $50,000, let's teach Mandarin in 6th grade. We're saying, what's the 5-year plan on it? You know, because if you're teaching in 6th grade, next year you're teaching in 6th and 7th grade, after that you're teaching 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. By the way, does that mean that over time we're going to be teaching honors Mandarin or Mandarin 6 to take care of the kids? I have no problem that we're doing that. But give the full picture every time you're bringing something in. And the Board of Ed doesn't do that. The administration doesn't do that to the Board of Ed, when to the board members. And I have a problem with that. Because if you add all these new things that they're adding in, some of them are state mandated, like the learn to play or play to learn thing that they're doing. There should be almost a list of, here's the things that we've implemented over the last 5 years. Here's what the cost of running those things are. And that's part of substantiating what you're doing. But on the same token, every time I've been in business, and this is sometimes where efficiency is somewhat not discussed, if I implemented something, either internally on a business, a group that I was managing, or even coming in as a consultant, I go back and look to see what's working, what needs to be tweaked, and what isn't working. And that, just a feeling, isn't done on a consistent basis. So those are the other things that go on. Plus what we don't like, which we've mentioned, is you can't go out and say you're cutting 15 paras or the IDEA program. And I don't know that that was discussed at any time in executive session or anything with the Board of Ed, and dropping it on everyone when you do your budget where there's only 6 weeks for everybody to respond.
Why should that have been in executive session?
I don't know that it could have been an executive session, but if they wanted to change the IDEA program, they have a strategic meeting in what is it, July, August? Raise it up. If you're thinking that maybe we want to change the paras and bring in interns to do it, that should be discussed.
I mean, weren't they having to do that though because they had to think about big line items
Correct.
to cut because of the 3 to 4% guidance? Like,
No.
That's why they did
Do you
it.
want to give me an opportunity in that budget? I promised that they wouldn't have been cut and we would have come up with those, with appropriate numbers.
But I
Well,
think the
So
more-
that's what I'm saying, that's an excuse.
But I think
So,
when we're talking about TGSNA though, and this process that you all are doing, I think that this committee has, I mean, what is it, 2018, I think,
yeah,
ish. I feel like every year there is a frustration around the lack of control, and I do think we would like, I think I can say this with confidence, we would like a little more control over it. We feel as if our only vote is yes, and not voting yes is punishing the Board of Education and the schools. So I think that if there's any discussion going forward about how the checks and balances work at the very end of the budget process, this committee, on behalf of the RTM, I think we would like to feel like we could do, I'm not saying we're interested in increasing the budget, but I think that maybe there's a situation when that would be necessary, and I think that we should be able to say no and not have the result of that be the reversion to the last year's budget. I think that seems improper, and it gives the Board of Finance all of the power, and I don't think that's a good balance for the town government.
And I think
I'm not going to disagree, but one of the things I might suggest is bringing in the Board of Ed in September, October, because that's when they really start working on their budget, and bring in Adley, bring in Jill, and start saying, what are you guys thinking? Have some input there. Now, this budget, the guidance was 3.5%. All right? I heard it, I didn't think they were gonna make it. But I knew that up front because I knew what was going on.
But I think with Liza's thing, I'll just say, I think that frustration isn't unique to this committee alone. I've been lucky
No.
enough to be on 4, and at each time, the sentiment is, and I think really, I've said this previously, I think when there's a gap of knowledge, and I'm willing to learn, be educated, find the resources, I think people will fill that in with the least generous interpretation. And I think when people feel like, well, I guess, we have no choice except to kind of roll back to a yes, but nobody's happy about it, I don't think that makes for a good town culture, our government either. So I think, and I'm not putting it on the two of you, I think this is extraordinarily helpful. I just think, as you're considering, I sort of second what Liza said. I think if there are other pathways, even if that means we need to show up I thought the committee thing was a great suggestion. I'm new to this committee, I haven't considered that, I looked them up, put them in the notes, that's excellent. And a beautiful way to be informed. So I agree, it's my understanding we've invited them to come in and speak previously, so maybe just doing that again.
Right,
in
and doing
September,
it
'cause
early on.
More knowledge, I think, helps everybody's collective
So
understanding.
I'll mention a couple of key
Please.
dates,
Yeah.
because I remember, at one time, Jim Palin chaired F&B, and I was his vice chair, and my whole focus was on the Board of Ed budget, because my first year on F&B, I was looking at a $20 million town budget, and the rest of the budget's in the Board of Ed, and I say, what am I wasting my time on, the 20-minute thing? The big one's over there. So some of the things that we were able to do, by the way, and I always get these abbreviations wrong. So when the SRBI came into play, as vice chair of F&B, I went to the Board of Finance meeting and explained why, even though this was an increased cost, we need to do this, because the discrepancy model wasn't working, and it ultimately, if run right, which it wasn't then, can save children first and costs later. I'm sorry, I put children first. So that's something that was done. On the same token, what was happening on the Board of Ed, and it's going back years, they would record a wrong number. At that time, we were getting 100% reimbursement from excess cost reimbursement, and they put down 500,000. And then they get back $1 million. And then they spend the $1 million and use the fact that they spent the $1 million for the next year's budget, saying, well, this is what we spent last year, and then put down another 500,000. And I challenged the Board of Ed and John Bolton, who was at the time the chair, and he challenged them, and that's how we now have a more sophisticated way of calculating what our excess cost reimbursement is going to be. So there are things that you can do, but November is when they talk about their capital projects. that's when they're gonna go to their budget and do it. The, the transfers, you know, John Cena is now the chair of the finance committee, they don't last long, but you can go and listen to that.
Meetings are the chair.
To meetings.
Just kidding.
Yeah, right.
Just the way you
No,
said it. Just the way you said it.
Fortunately, John didn't last longer than his episode. John's a good financial mind. So, but the meetings don't last long, very good. The meetings don't last long, but then they're later brought back. But that package is out there. When the Board of Ed is having a meeting, you know, they put out a package, I believe you get it, the vice chair of your committee should get it also. Distribute it. Now, I will tell you something that drives me nuts. If I go to a Board of Selectmen meeting and there's 5 items there, they have a little blue thing that I can click on that, same for the Board of Finance. I can click on it and it brings me to that section of the 100-page document that I can read what those things I want. The Board of Ed doesn't do that, so you gotta scroll through a million things. But we did get to have them to change their financials. If you recall, all their numbers on their Excel sheets were upside down like this, so I had to take my computer and turn it like this so I could read the blooming thing. And Rich Rudel finally changed it so you can read it on a committee. So there are things we can do, but get involved, that's the best way.
I think the influence that you're describing is important, and especially in a town of this size, but I do think that the disconnect where it happens is once the budget leaves Board of Education, you know, that's where we struggle. That's what we're discussing, right? We're discussing the connect to the Board of Finance. But can I maybe ask you about 2 things that you presented the other day? I don't want to stop this discussion.
I do
but-
want to say one thing. I have a history of being a strong Board of Ed budget supporter, so I'm not worried about that. So,
So I just want to make sure I understand it, the slide that you presented the other day at RTM, right? So as it stands today, 4.9 Board of Education, 5.2 Board of Selectmen, 20% up on cost of debt service. If we don't draw anything from the capital fund, our taxes will go up. And forget the mill rate, the revaluations,
Yeah.
our taxes absolutely will go up by 6.6%.
yes, in theory, yes.
In theory, right? So here's a question regarding the capital budget, because as you said, we don't want to bond everything, right? Because it's less than a million, so there's additional 5.9 million that needs to be raised by taxes, the way I
Yep.
understand, right? So will our taxes really go closer to 7% unless we dip into the capital fund? Do I read it properly?
All right, so that's the first part. Now, our mill rate went up by, the grand list went up by 0.49, 49 basis points. That will generate an additional $700,000 to $800,000 that's not taken off of what Mai showed you, but is something that we'll consider that's going to lower the taxes, all right? Number 2, we knew going in that the $3 million on investment income did not include the bond that there's going to be issuing. They're going to be talking about it tomorrow. So it has no earnings on that for what's going on. And while there'll be drawdowns on it, don't be surprised if that generates another $300,000 to $400,000 of revenue. The Board of Selectmen budget, they're currently, as I mentioned, under negotiation with the health care plan. If they effectuate what they think, that could reduce the budget by another $500,000 for their operating budget. That brings them down to about a 3.8 increase. Those are monies that we haven't even gotten to that will chip away at that number. So then, and I'll tell you one of the things that I'm doing that I'd like support on. So then we go and we look at what amount do we have in our grand list, in our general fund, and what's available. Now, they always show you what it's at 12%. It really should be at 16, 17% of what it is to what we're raising. Now, when I looked, and then they'll decide what of that they can further pay down capital, because that can only be used for special appropriations that happen during the year, or it can be used for paying down capital. It can't be used to pay down operating expenses. Plus, they'll close out projects, and if there's any extra money there, they can allocate some of that. I'm concerned about what amount of money we're allocating for capital, all right? And I'll tell you the reason why. Read the appendix of the Board of Ed's budget. There's between $1 million to $1.1 million that are federal grants that come from the Department of Education. I think those grants are at risk. And I'm being kind, I'm not even going into the detail.
It's on the TV all the time.
Yeah, I know, but also Mr. Trump's budget advisor was co-author of the 2025 plan, and specific to that part. So if we don't have a Department of Education, we may not be getting those grant funds, and I don't know what the new budget's going to be from either the President or the Congress, and I'm not getting political.
Obviously, we don't know that.
Right, but what I do know is, I believe those funds are at risk. And so rather than releasing $1 million to pay down capital, I'd rather we hold those in the general fund, because I don't believe that the Board of Ed, with the budget as it stands now, can find another $1 million, all right? So I'm going to the Board of Finance and suggesting that's my position. Now, there's something else that's happening at the same time. $40 million was added into the excess cost fund, which quite honestly, the state has not equaled funding that account equal to the number of claims post-COVID that is happening across the state, not just in Darien, but across the state. So that's something we can talk about, because that helps. If, in fact, that is signed, the preliminary numbers show that the preliminary numbers show that that would move us from 59.9% up to about 72% reimbursement, and we had put in about 70% for the budget. And might generate, I think Rich mentioned, maybe as much as $500,000. They have a deficit of about 50, 60 running right now. I don't know that they won't use some of that to refund some of the other things that they may have cut in this, but potentially there could be another 400,000 that comes back to the town at the end of the year. So at least if that's coming back and they're not playing with that money, then 600,000 should be kept in that budget as a protection should the Board of Ed lose those grants, that they're not going through an exercise of figuring out what education things they have to cut are getting cut. So that's my position to the Board of Finance, and that's something I'd like support of, because there's I'm going to cajole, but if I don't get my way, there's other things I might try and do. So those are things that we can have influence on, and you know, and yes, I understand the budgets that are going on and even the little nuances that are here. I've done it for a number of years, and that. And Peter knows my mind on numbers is like photographic. I can't remember what somebody told me I had to do 2 days ago, but those numbers I remember.
So the town is saving a lot of money through may save $500,000 by changing health insurance to
Yes.
to the what they call it the town
The state fund.
state fund, right? Is it something, because we struggle, the Board of Education struggles with it too, right? It's up 44% over the last 5 years, 8% a year. I mean, you know, it's growing a lot.
So let's deal with that, because Jill tried to deal with that. We were capped at a 14% increase in our health care. And if you look at New Canaan and somebody else, you might see a 7 or 8% increase in their health care. Why are we so much higher? Part of what's done, and maybe the 7, 8% is inflation. All right, fine. But the rest of what we have, and we're capped, we really should be higher than that, is that our employees are, each one of these funds, the library uses a state fund, we have our own for the town, the Board of Ed. Our experience pool currently has 20 more individuals who are either current or former teachers who have very high cost medical bills. Now, I could complain that the fund is going up high and everything. I'm more concerned that we have 20 former dedicated employees whose families are going through significant medical issues right now. And I think that's where our priority should be. That does result in a 14% increase. It's the experience rate of our pool that's why we're so high. And we really should be higher, except the consortium that we're in capped any increase at 14%. So that explains why medical has been high, because these individuals have been experiencing this for some time. I hope that provides some additional insight on what's going on there. Because it's two things, what's the cost of medical, plus what our experience is. And if you have a lot of high-cost million-dollar claims, our pool's gonna go up. We're considered a high risk at our Board of Ed.
Yeah, thank you.
So, yeah, there's things that'll be done, you know, but quite honestly, if we have a 5% increase in the mill rate, so be it. That's where I've been saying we've been masking some of the costs. I will tell you, consistent 5-year increases,
5% increase.
yeah, on our mill rate, that starts having us being non-competitive with our peer towns, I don't care how good your schools are. That will have an effect that potentially can have an effect on our grammars. Because one of the things that keeps Darien's values of property so low, or so high rather, is our tax rate. And if we start getting into some of the other tax rates of some of our surrounding in our DURG that have much higher than us, that will affect our grammars.
I wouldn't discount the schools entirely, though. I agree.
No, I'm not,
But-
I'm saying
All right,
schools
I
are
do.
still important.
Yeah, I just,
But
to
I'm
me,
just saying,
I think it's really nice, and I think
it's
it's
a
a sense
balance.
of pride.
It
I
is a
agree.
balance.
But and I said before, I think there's a lot of value in the fact that we are the only town, and I'm really proud of this, and it's one of the reasons we chose. We looked outside of New York, we looked at all the towns, and it's a luxury to be able to have the choice. But for us, I thought it was really beautiful that we were the only town that had, and not to knock private schools or charter schools, but I thought what a beautiful way for everybody who lives here to have buy-in. You know, that there's 5 public schools for the elementary, 1 middle, 1 high school, and that creates a sense of everybody has, you know, I don't know, skin in the game, so to say. So yeah, I didn't mean to misspeak and say you were discounting the schools, but I also think, I think the mill rate is very important, and it's important to look at, but I also just think our schools are going to be equally valuable, and that was certainly what brought us here.
I
We had
will
other choices.
say that I have been arguing against an artificial 3% increase in our mill rate, as opposed
Yeah.
to, if you want these services from the Board of Selectmen, if you want these things from the Board of Ed, and they're rising by 4 or 5% a year, then, and quite honestly, even in that debt, I was listening to somebody speak at the Board of Finance when we were talking about our debt may go up to $300 million. Well, let's just go through some real quick numbers. $103 million from HHR, $60 million from Oxford. John used $60 million for Middlesex, which
Yeah.
is really, I'm hearing about 75, but if you give the 20% back that we possibly get from grants, 60 works there. So that brings us up to 220,000. Oh, by the way, we have to go back to Darien High School, and there's work that we have to do at Tokenique also.
Yeah.
So I just went through $200 million of that $300 million is what we've invested in our
Yeah.
schools. So, and unfortunately, because we're doing rehabs, that's a 20-year bond. It's not a 30-year bond, where I know a lot of people concerned about Great Island. Great Island is a 30-year bond costing us about $4 million a year. So It's much different. The growth that, and by the way, that growth that we have now, it's about 6.7 this year for the Board of Ed. That doesn't count other things that we bonded, and we haven't really bonded all of the HHR. And what we do in our bonding is for the first couple of years, we pay interest only and not principal. So we sort of buy some time waiting for other things to come off the schedule. So, you know, and in the meantime, even though I'm concerned that it's 75 million for Middlesex, because I mentioned 50 in the Board of Ed meeting, and Adley brought me over and he goes, we'd be lucky if it's 50, Jack, it's 75. And I went, ugh. And he goes, I know you're saying ugh, but I know you'll be up there telling the RTM to pay the 75. And he's right, I will. So, I mean, while I cringe at some of these numbers, I also know what we have to do, because we can't have facilities that don't meet the current day standards. So, I know we've taken up a lot more than Appendix B, so,
It's helpful though, thank you.
but maybe this answers some of your questions later on. But yeah, feel free to go to the, to the Board of Finance, public hearing. I'll be there. I'm always there. And, you know, speak your mind. I would, I don't want to say this because I don't want to jinx it, but I would be surprised if there's a cut this year. So,
Alright,
and if there is, I'll probably be speaking against it.
I'm gonna get up tomorrow and say, Jack told us that you're not
Yeah.
gonna do this year, so.
You know, Dan Bumgarner's response, you know, Dan responded to Jill's presentation and seemed to be fine with coming in at 4.92.
Yeah.
So, you know,
I just
Listen
knew
to
Jill
what
wasn't
Dan
there,
said.
so.
so, anyway.
Thank
All right,
you, Jack.
thank you. Yeah,
Thank you,
very
Frank.
much.
Thank you,
This was really
and
helpful.
please give us, you know, if you have any questions, you know, I do answer my phone, and I respond to email, and here's the only other thing that I will say, because I haven't hit your committee yet. Your committee and my committee need to meet outside of a full committee meeting to discuss this budget, because when the Board of Finance discusses various parts of their budget, F&B has input, and this committee should also have input. That's part of the buddy system, and we really haven't worked the buddy system well with this committee, all right? And I want to work well with this committee. So that's another way that you start to meet and have access and influence on the Board of Finance. So,
Awesome.
in the meantime, you guys do a great job.
Oh, thanks, Jill.
You really do. So,
Nice to see you.
we're gonna leave.
All right.
Actually, I may stay.
Yes, of
Yeah.
course, of course. We would love
From
to have you.
one committee chairman to another, I'd like to see how another committee works.
I'm very happy you're staying.
I'm gonna go home and tune into the Board of Selectmen meeting, because they're talking about something that I have to report to you on.
Good night, Jack.
Thank you,
Good
Jack.
night.
Sweet dreams.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right.
Go really place.
Good thing.
Thanks again, Jack. Very good. Okay. So, I think we can zip through the rest of this actually very quickly. Let's introduce our newest committee members. I know it seems weird to start with introductions now, but if you, Stephanie, would you mind starting us off in a little intro about yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Stephanie. My kids go to Henley. I have a kindergartner and a third grader. I've been on the PTO board for 3 years, and I think I'll be there forever. I'm really invested in our education system and budgeting and mess and greatness and all the things, and so I thought I would join the RTM, and I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Welcome and thank you. We're happy to have you.
Hi everybody, my name is Anna Loman. My daughters are already grown up, very independent, but they went to Oxbridge and middle school and high school, so I have more time, free time available, and I like to to do some good contribution for the town. I'm here practically for almost 30 years. I moved from Italy directly, so the beginning was kind of tough. But I like Diana, it's very peaceful.
Yes.
I couldn't live in Stanford or New Canaan. It's just perfect.
Well, welcome, we're glad you're here. Should we say our names quickly so they know who we are?
Sure.
Okay, Liza Lucas,
Mary Ellen Goatee.
Ann King.
Ashley Podana.
Janet.
Karen Mack.
Peter Marucci.
Okay, sorry, I'm just gonna try and zip through this. We need to approve minutes from our February 3rd, 2025 meeting. Let's see, can I have a motion to approve? All right, I see Ashley and Janet second. All in favor? Okay, great. All right, I'm gonna kind of condense a few of these things. We have not met since the Board of Ed approved the budget on February 11th. I don't know if everyone was, watching that meeting. It was lengthy, it was helpful to watch, and I think I even reminded it a few times. And then last week, Jill summarized the budget for the Board of Finance at their meeting. I don't know if you all had a chance to listen to that. But the next step now, as we all know, is the Board of Finance needs to review and take action on the budget. So that's where we are with that. I would love if anyone wants to discuss any part of that, because it is like a big chunk of review, and we haven't had a meeting since then. If we need to discuss anything, I think we should do that now, with keeping in mind that tomorrow is the public hearing for the Board of Finance. I'm happy to go, and I will say in front of our discussion that I was planning to go with the committee's blessing to say that we were hopeful that the Board of Finance would approve the Board of Ed budget. Again, I would only be making comments on behalf of our committee, so I do not want to do or say anything that is not with the full support of our committee. So I just want to try and make this more efficient. So that was what I had in mind, but let's go ahead and discuss what's happened and what we think would be best for the committee to say, if anything, tomorrow. Anyone? Sorry. I'll say, I thought the way that they did the budget discussion with the one big amendment was new and a little confusing for me, but I thought it made it a little difficult to follow during the, I don't know, maybe that was just me.
It was the first time they've done it like that, right?
It's the first time I've seen it.
Same, okay.
Yeah, I don't, did that?
What do you mean, I'm sorry?
You know how when they were voting on the budget, usually they
Yeah.
just go through each item and say yes, no. But they made one giant amendment to the budget. It was
Yeah.
like a package, and then they had to, like, vote yes or no to approve the items within the amendment. So for me, it was a little tough to follow that.
And I think they made that decision without, from my understanding, without consulting.
That's what I was just gonna say,
Right, like they
yes.
didn't consult the Board of Ed, they just made that
the
decision.
And someone even stood up, I think her name's Kate, and said like, this was done, you forced us into a position
Yeah.
where we're not voting on line items.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I don't-
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and I was confused by that, like how does that even happen?
I mean, I think it's, I think there's always new ways to do things that might be better, might be more efficient. I just think because I wasn't used to it, I struggled, I felt like it was a little more difficult. And then I think it would have been easy to forget to say whether there was an item you wanted to vote for or against.
Right, that was what I think she
Agreed.
was saying, right?
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
doesn't agree, she doesn't wanna vote on this whole thing.
Right, she
wants to vote.
And I think it was not normal or that's not historically how they did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if I don't know if anyone else felt that way. I just was,
I agree, it was confusing.
Yeah.
yeah. But, I don't know,
I think, what you propose to say to the finance board, I think is in line with how we all feel, like we support the Board of Ed budget, however it got cut, however it ended up, like, that's still how we want it to be, and we don't want it to be cut any further, and I think that's our consensus.
I agree.
Like, we're in this unfortunate position of 5 interns and 5 adults out on the street, but like, here we are now, and we don't want it to get any worse, so
Yeah.
please pass it as is.
And we haven't forgotten that the IDEA program has not been cut.
yeah,
We appreciate that.
Yeah.
yeah.
Because they're getting ready for next year's.
I mean, the letter,
But the Board of Finance didn't have anything to do with the IDEA program not getting cut, that was,
That was public comment.
yeah,
That
that was like
amazing
everyone getting
community work, for sure.
upset
Yeah.
about,
Or
yeah.
at least
Yeah.
they listened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
the letter that you wrote, delivered to the Board of Education, I thought is a good base to how to deliver similar one to Board of
Yeah,
Finance.
I agree. I
There was a part that I added and I eventually, I don't think it made it, and let me just quickly read it. Something that I think we should say. Importantly, we see that items largely out of the district control, namely special education, health insurance, and transportation, have been growing at an unsustainably high 8% annual rate over the last number of years, even accelerating recently, and now together constitute over 42% of the budget. These have been crowding on initiatives and the proper functioning of the school system. Therefore, we strongly urge you to consider these items as unusual and in need of funding in well excess of the suggested guidance.
I think that's perfect.
So Jill, at the beginning of the public hearing for Board of Education, basically addressed that, because
Yeah.
she said that they were
Yeah.
going to be, I think that those comments are,
Have been delivered to the Board
I
of
think that
Finance.
I
Yeah.
think they're getting that, because they said that they're gonna do that in their summer
Mhm.
retreat. Again,
We
I,
could-
you know,
Or maybe just support for that. I mean, again, you're the one speaking wisest, I don't want to
Yeah.
add to it,
No,
but I
I
just,
mean-
yeah.
I, see, this is where, because I think, between, if we're talking about a special education, I mean, just as an example, special education budget, or loss of paras, or whatever the, IDEA
Yeah.
program, I think we're at the point now where my concern is just another cut.
Yeah.
So I think that my suggestion would be, our committee has worked pretty hard this year to, to inform ourselves on all these issues. And we follow the process, and we feel that the number that's been presented is, we're in support of it, but more importantly, we don't think it should be cut further. And I
Yeah.
think because I think that's what they need to know from us, who's going to have to recommend
Yeah.
the number to the full RTM. I don't disagree with a word you said.
Now, I think what's important, I agree with you, this year, right, they should approve it, there's reasons why to approve it, but there's a 5-year projections here, they are over 5.5%, right? With the increase in debt costs that we have because of Great Island and because of these infrastructure projects, but a lot of the debt is Great Island. The taxes will go up 6% up. 6% increase in taxes doubles your taxes in 12 years. So I think that the Board of Education, and this is really Board of Education, if I was part of Board of Education, there are 5 or 6 sort of buckets that I would look at, and I mentioned some of them last time, but it's something that we should try to understand once this budget is approved.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but some of them. And let me just maybe mention them, right? Because these should be, cutting one security officer, doing these around the edges, what I call it, is just not gonna get us to sustainable budget. If we think sustainable is somewhere between 4 and 5, or maybe 4, right? Obviously, critical is negotiation with the unions, right, and with our professionals. But when I listened to the Board of Finance meeting, there was a CEO of a for-profit education company, if you remember.
Oh, yeah, that was,
Right?
yeah,
And
that
he
was
was saying
interesting.
his inflation is 12% a year,
Yeah.
right? So we cannot count on that. But I think there are a couple things that we should consider, right? These are big items. One is, what is really the scope? Because the way I think about it, right, there are state mandated functions of the school system in order for our kids to graduate. And then we, as a community, have added a bunch of these things to our pyramid, right?
Yeah.
Safety, you know, great fields, you know, extra classes, Mandarin, whatever you want to say.
Right, for sure.
So, but the scope of function what the Darien school should do and provide should stop somewhere. It's very expensive. We have 18 psychologists. Maybe we want to have them, right? But that's if I was sitting Board of Education, and it doesn't answer the conversation of Board of Finance, but these are all the things that I would think about, is, you know, does the family responsibility start somewhere and school responsibility stop somewhere, right? And it's difficult, you know, it's difficult to do because of the things that we went through the last 5 years, but that's one thing, right? Second one is the special education. I mention it every time. We have 21% in school in our school district of kids who have individual educational plans. Their average is 16, New Canaan is 14, right? And we should be proud of it. Maybe we do more for our kids, or maybe our process, how we approve these, is not proper or is too broad. And again, there may be some history to this. So that's something actually that I would suggest, and it's sort of tied up to what Frank and Jack brought up. I think we should invite the person in charge, is it Ms. Klein, I think? And maybe the one board member who is most you know, involved with the topic and trying to understand it, why is it? Obviously this comes together with the insourcing of some of these. And I don't, they are thinking about it, but these are, you know, we pay $8 million for kids who go to private schools, right? If we insource some, that should be some savings. So that's number 2. Number 3, the administrative infrastructure, department chairs, vice principals, and all that. This is complicated. You know, Dr. Adler built a great system, but it's expensive. You know, that's another topic, and I don't have a view on it, whether we do it efficiently or not. 4 is the teams in middle school. Dr. Adler himself said it's a very expensive way to run it. A lot of parents get very emotional about saying, this is the only way we can do it. When I ask my kids, they're like, we don't care about it. So, you know, there's truth somewhere, but if we really want to have not a 5%, 6% budget, but 4.5%, maybe this is the way to do it. The number 5 on my list is curriculum and curriculum support function. Is 40 people, $6 million budget. These people are very smart, they do a lot of work, but when I listen to this, you know, it seems to me part of their job is a think tank for our school system. And I always thought when I read these, you know, information about the best and smartest school system and best results, Finland, Singapore, Hungary, they give a lot of rights, a lot of freedoms to the school, to the teachers themselves. So it's not the vice principal or it's not the superintendent, but it's rather, you know, measure them once a half year, once a year, whatever, measure the kids primarily because it's students' outcome that we care about. So I don't know, there may be philosophical difference, but it's a second group of people that I think be helpful, Dr. Fettigan, I think, and maybe Sarah Parent from the board, who was the curriculum subcommittee, to explain to me where am I wrong, that all these jobs are necessary, you know, and these people deliver a lot of value to the student outcomes, right? Because I'm just not sure whether the teacher who teaches in the system for 25 years needs somebody to tell him what is the curriculum of the class that she's been teaching for 15 years, you know, and does it have to change every year? And the last one is, and you know, I mentioned it, but maybe that's non-event, is this transportation. I mean, our transportation costs increase 7% every year, and primarily it's because we don't have a depot. I'm sure it's been discussed.
That issue has come up
Has
for
been
the
come
first
up.
time in the past couple of years. We don't have it. It's never
Right.
even been dreamed of.
Right. So, anyway, these are 5 or 6 things that I would, if I was sitting Board of Education, try to get under. And I'm sure they're doing it, but that's something that I would.
I think what would be really helpful when I hear you talk about this and when I hear the others just come up is, I think it would be helpful maybe if we drafted a letter or some feedback for the board, you know, in response to the budget process, separately from like having a vote of confidence for the Board of Ed budget tomorrow. I think, because I think that, I honestly think that should really be very, very short and just we're supportive of this and, you know, we.
Yes, this is
but-
unrelated to that.
Yeah, but I think what you're saying is really important, and I think everything else we've mentioned, not just tonight, but you know, the myriad topics we've covered, you know, during this budget process, I think it would be helpful if we did put it, you know, in either an email or you know, whatever we want to do, just to say, these are things that keep coming up, in the same way that we attack poor Frank and Jack about, the process that we are always, confounded by at the end of the budget process. I think it would be good to do that and put it out there for them, so they know how we feel.
And I do think that, every year since we've been on this committee, I've been on this committee for 3 years, maybe 4 years, is at some point during the budget process, we do sit down with the superintendent and maybe, the chair or vice chair of the board. So, yes, we can write it, but mention it to them and sort of get them thinking about it.
Would you, I can ask if we can meet, in person. I think that is.
At some point,
Yeah, I
they're
think
busy
that's
now
a
with the
good
budget
idea.
and the board of finance, but at some point,
It might be more
Too late for
productive
this
if it's
year,
not
but-
next
I
year.
agree. I think outside of budget season, it might be a totally different thing.
Yeah,
It's
maybe
about
that's
clarity
even
and
better.
curiosity.
Like,
Yeah.
no one's reading their emails anyway.
Yeah.
I feel
I know.
like, no, I don't even know if,
Have they responded to anything that you
No.
To
see?
you, no.
but I think that maybe that's actually better. That's,
Yeah.
again, this is why I'm grateful we're all here, thinking, because, I think that's better. We should just say,
Yeah.
not, whenever it's less, busy, these
I think
thoughts are not
September's
going
great.
away. Again, we
Yeah.
revisit these topics every year, and not all of them, but many of them, and I think that maybe that would be the most productive way to kind of get through it and,
Well, we can all help with this. Like, I'd be willing to help with a letter. I feel like some of us, even knowing about those subcommittees, I've been watching Board of Ed meetings. I'm new to the committee this year. I've not watched a subcommittee or been to a subcommittee. So even I'd be happy to raise my hand to go to one and report out, if that makes us. Because I agree. I like everything you're raising, Peter. It's it only makes us better at this job, and then I think it would at least help me in those corners of just frustration or feeling like there's something I don't understand or limited to have just the best chance possible. Not to be we're attacking you line item by line item, but we're just truly looking to do our job
right.
best we can and have a two-way street instead of this void of information,
Yeah, I think that's really, that would be effective.
Jack suggested that we invite them to come to
Yeah.
see us, the board.
Yeah.
I think our Board of Education members are in touch with people all the time and know what's in the wind. And if any time we should have a meeting with them is before they go on their summer retreat. When they arrive here, they've made their decisions.
Okay.
And
What time is this one?
absolutely, they know
You're right.
what's going on, and people are sending in letters all the time. So
Yeah.
we're not, it isn't that you don't know anything and we'll have them come and learn more. We in theory know a lot about what the people want, but they know you better.
Yeah.
And can I just bring up something that's unheard of in Connecticut, I think, but some towns charge to use the bus. And it would be a major, enormous change, but we all know how empty those buses are most of the time. And
Maybe
source of revenue and some give free lunch and no bus and not more.
We have a meeting on the calendar for June 9th. I don't know if that would work, but that might be a better
Works for me.
time frame for us to ask if they want to have an in-person, before their summer break, but,
Retreat.
there's maybe one or two things I want to mention as I've watched this process
Yes.
of the Board of Education, right? So I think it's very thorough. I think all these PSDs have very good ideas, but I think two people actually that I think John Cena and the Board of Education, what has done for the efficiency together with Mr. Rudel is great. I know it takes a team, but I think his focus, his financial background has been very helpful. And the second thing that I noticed at the last meeting, which I thought was wonderful, is this achievement performance metrics. And there was a discussion, some people didn't want it, it's not baked in and all that, but I do think that, people say the school system is not a business, you cannot evaluate it, it's complicated. I think having these performance metrics that measure the outcomes, student outcomes over a period of time is extremely helpful. I know they are there, but making it some kind of dashboard is wonderful. I'm a big fan of it. Doesn't have to be only SATs and grades, but it can be participations, it can be the seals of, biliteracy, it could be a bunch of things. It could be also safety incidents or all that. So having something like that, I think it's wonderful. And for that, I want to give kudos to Mr. Grambling, who I think has been sort of pushing that agenda.
Anyone else wanna opine? Okay, everyone's exhausted. Annoying. Okay, let's see. All right, so I'll see about getting an in-person meeting on the calendar. I'm gonna give a very quick feedback tomorrow at the Board of Finance. If anyone would rather go and speak, let me know.
I don't think you should go every time. I really, yeah.
I only say that because I know that I'm not our most effective representative.
You're
but,
very eloquent speaker.
And then, let's see, and then, all right, public hearing at Board of Finance is tomorrow. Board of Finance votes April 3rd. We will probably, I don't know if we're voting, we have a meeting in April and a meeting in May. I'm not sure which one we're voting on the budget at. And then our final RTM vote, the budget meeting is May 12th, just to give you a heads up on when all of this is happening. And I think that, I have on the calendar that there's a Board of Ed meeting tomorrow, but I don't have the agenda and it's not online, so it's on their master calendar, so if I get that tomorrow, I will send it out. But I will be watching it if it is tomorrow later, because I'm gonna be at Board of Finance. Okay,
Sorry, that Board of Finance meeting is at 7.
7:30. I think it's at 7:30. I'm gonna double check.
Yes. As a member of the RTM, right, you can speak like as a public citizen. I think you
Right,
have to
right, right.
disclose, right, that you're a
Oh,
member of the
yeah.
RTM, but you're speaking, you can go privately.
No, I wouldn't.
Thank you for mentioning that. That's exactly
Yeah,
right.
in the
That's
verbal way, I apologize. Tired.
Well, it says March 12th, Wednesday, for the Board of Education meeting, in the budget book, so probably that's when it is.
That's so weird, because they have March 11th on there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. That's very helpful. Wednesday. Okay. Any other business? Would anyone like to motion to adjourn? All right, I see Ashley. And I'll second. Okay, meeting adjourned. Thanks, you guys.